Hola, ¿qué tal? How are you? How's your Spanish so far? Well, it really is a pleasure to be here with you. I'd like to thank the organizers, of course, for having me here. It is more than a pleasure, it is also a great honor for us because we are a very, very, very small studio. I'm here speaking on behalf of Casa Josephine. But I believe that when I was going through all the program of the speakers that are sharing with you here today and tomorrow their expertise, that you're going to get the feeling that, well, Madrid is a big puzzle and we are a tiny, tiny, very small piece in that puzzle. But somehow I thought that it would be interesting to share with you what I'm going to be speaking about. That is basically our way of working. And as an introduction, you know, the theme of this practicum is the power of narrative design. And this is what I'll share with you today, specifically speaking about our latest project that some of you are going to be visiting today and some of you tomorrow. So our studio is Casa Josephine. As I said, we're a very small studio. We started, the two of us, you see to the left of the image is Íñigo Aragón, my partner in life and business and in the studio. And when I try to describe who are we in the business, I always say that we are intruders. We are not interior designers. We both are art historians. This is our training, our degree, our masters, etc. That's how we met. Then Íñigo continued on studying fashion design and photography, and I continued on with my masters in creative writing. So we would think that those are disciplines that are not necessarily connected with design, but in a way, of course, they are, with interior design. And then, a long time ago, almost 20 years ago, we bought a house in the north of Spain. We redid it completely and turned it into a small accommodation, a small hotel, a bed and breakfast. And little by little, some of the guests that stayed there, and I'm talking about 18 years ago, with very limited means, little by little, some of the guests that stayed there started asking about, well, where we got the pieces from and asking for some advice in a more general way. And little by little, we realized that that could be a potential business line. Then we started sourcing pieces in France and reselling them, and one step at a time, with no other financial support or anything. The only thing that we had then is the same thing that we have now, which is our two sets of hands and our brains. Little by little, we became professionals, but we always feel like we are still intruders in this business. Now we are a small team. There's 6 people working in our studio. There will be soon probably 2 more, maybe 2, 3 more, but we're not planning to go any bigger. And well, in spite of coming from the margins of the profession, some of our projects got some recognition, and last year we were awarded as the best studio in Spain by Architectural Digest magazine, and our latest project, that is what I'll share with you today, was published very recently in the World of Interiors, which is, it's a dream for anybody, and it's a dream, in our case, I think, much more from where we're from. So our way of working is always narrative driven. And this may sound like something very vague and very abstract, but when I say that our work is narrative driven, is that when we design a project for a client, I personally feel that we have to be able to explain what we're doing at any given moment of the process. And in my case, because I work with the clients directly, I think this need comes from the fact that I know that we don't have the training that other studios may have. We don't have maybe the experience, or maybe we don't come from a long tradition, a long family of interior designers or constructors, etc. So I feel like I should be able to explain what we're doing in very precise words at any given moment. So that means that when we set to work, Íñigo is the designers, but I'm monitoring what the studio is doing and building a strong narrative, first, as a selling point to the client, and second, and most important, as our way of working. We always start with abstract ideas, then we land those ideas into materials and pieces, and the last thing that we do is the design itself. This is our usual way of working. But for this specific project, I felt like we had to stress it much more because of what this project is and who the client is. 3 years ago, in a very roundabout, almost random way, through a former client, we met with a young investor, and we started talking about the real estate situation in Madrid, and we started obviously with the forever complaint, why does everything look the same? How come there is this dynamism, there is this really momentum that Madrid is getting? How come in high-end real estate we seem to be seeing a repetition of the same and the same and the same? So, well, from our part, we consider ourselves an experimental studio, and this is something that, well, we see it, we don't feel like we're part of it, but we see it, and actually in our studio, we complain about that all the time. We have the feeling that it's a formula that obviously is financially successful, but maybe from the point of view of design, it's not as fresh as it could be, having in mind that there are fantastic studios with great potential working in Madrid right now. So we met with this investor, and somehow we connected. He said, well, would you be ready to do something that is design-oriented 100%, something that is your signature, something that is a one-off apartment that will be the first of many series, of a series of many, that will be one-off pieces, each of them completely different, each of them 100% design-oriented, to the point that design will be the selling point? And then, of course, we said, yes. And then he said, will I have a say in the design? And we said, well, of course, no. He tried twice. He said, how about no? The second, what? No. That's it. But he understood, and I think in that sense, I really have to acknowledge his intuition and his instinct. He understood something that, to me, it's clear. The world of design and the world of business are two different worlds. They need each other, but they should never overlap. The moment when they overlap, it's a catastrophe. It's a disaster. It's two different worlds. I mean, finances and investments, they live, their aim is to turn greed into a system. They do it very well. Our world is completely different. We need money to be transferred from their world to our world, and they need our talent transferred from our world to their world, because otherwise it would be unbearable for them and impossible for us. So we presented this to him, and he understood that very clearly, and he said, okay, I close my eyes, do your thing. This is something that I guess happens once in a lifetime. So he said, go ahead. Mind you, we go back to what I told you before. We see ourselves as intruders. So that means that we always experiment. We always learn with every new project. We told our client, we're shooting in the dark. The result may be horrible, but if you're ready, we'll go all the way. So he said, well, I have this apartment, and then you can see the general plan to the left. Interior designers and architects, you know what it means. It's almost a nightmare if you have an apartment like this that is a long rectangle. Now, those of you that will join me in the visit to the apartment today, then we will speak about how we worked in space. That's something that I will not cover now because we don't have time. And you see, the plan of Madrid is what it is. And it's important because, it is the white dot, it is the location, which is where the former walls of the city used to be, and the walls were knocked down in 1868. And then new apartments were built in the style of French apartments of the time, with very narrow facades and long layout that goes into the building with the light that comes filtered through windows. But this is a first floor. So the first thing in this apartment, as it was, is the lack of natural light. We only have one good facade with 2 windows. And all the rest, it gets darker and darker as you go into the building. So Inigo and I, we sat together and we said, well, we have to think of what other moments or places in the history of interior design have similar characteristics. And immediately, to us, the idea of Venice came into mind. Because in Venice, you find this very often, narrow facades, and then very dim, I would say almost dark light that comes in through small windows, and it's a light that is either reflected in the water or simply filtered by the fog that you have 5-6 months of the year. So we started working with that. Then my mind works different than Íñigo's, so whenever I need to work, well, immediately I go to the library to find a text that helps me think in that direction. And in that case, it was text by Russian-American poet Joseph Brodsky that used to live in Venice for a long time. And then, from an article that he wrote, we took 2 sentences to start the actual brainstorming work. And one, he says, and the water, reflecting and refracting everything, including itself, alternates forms and substances, sometimes gently, sometimes monstrously. And then there's another one that he says, this is the winter light at its purest. It carries no energy or warmth, having shed them and left them behind somewhere in the universe. So with this corpus, we go to the next. That is, how do we transfer that in 3 floors? These ideas. We have the ideas of reflection and reflection, transmutation and fading light. 1 arrow down. Reflection and refraction takes us to the need of gilded surfaces, polished finishes, which will translate into mirrors, brass, lacquered wood. The idea of transmutation leads us to looking for a gradual color palette, partial reflections, gradual transitions of materials from hard to soft, which takes us to tinted mirrors, aged surfaces, travertine, and then a transition from granite to silk, or from granite to glass. So from very hard to very soft, or from very hard to very frail. And then how we work with the light. We will need gradually dimmer reflections, filtered light to get an overall golden hue, which means materials that can reflect that light, as we find in Venice, that is velvet, wild silk, and stucco. And this is how we work it. What we see here is what you saw in the previous slides in words. This is one of the sitting areas of the apartment, and you find here the gilded mirrors, the tinted mirrors, mirrors that at the same time double the size of the rooms, but also offer partial visions, because we like this idea of breaking an image into smaller pieces. Materials, particularly the textiles that reflect. It is wild silk and velvet. And then, as you can see here, the transition from the very hard stone to the glass, or to the velvet, or to the silk. As for the gradual palette, what you can see here will, in the apartment, shift into the exact opposite. We're here in gold and reddish, and gradually, as we go into the building, we will get to silver and green, which is the exact opposite. So, by the way, what I'm showing you is how we transfer those ideas to the box of the house. Later, I'll share with you how we transfer that to the curating and the sourcing of the pieces. So for this case, we designed this big brass sculpture that is made of, well, it's brass obviously, but here we wanted to show this idea of transmutation of the matter. It's many small plates. Some of them, they're soaked in water, some of them in acid, some of them are hammered, and they go from bright gold-looking to green, to show what the patina does over time. And the project is very heavy in brass precisely because of that, because you can polish it to make it look brand new, or you can simply leave it to age. The stucco, because of the wax that reflects the light, and as you can see, light reflects in everything, partially. This project could not be replicated with bright light. It would be too much. It would look like a blast of light right in your eyes. But it makes sense if we precisely want to turn a dim natural source of light into something that may be more richer in texture. So you can see, we designed everything it's a total project. We designed everything from the sofas, etc., to some of the furnitures, like the closet that you can see here on the left, combining metals that may look like they are golden looking because they're reflected on a mirror or because they are. And we use all the time this combination of golden looking metals to silver looking metals. We break the perspectives visually in this apartment to create this idea of reflection and refraction. As you can see, everything reflects everything. And in the photo, this looks much lighter than what it actually is, but it feels much more intimate when you are here. As for the selection of pieces, we'll get to that later. We designed the kitchen all in brass. You can see that on the left of the image. Of course, it's a fully functional kitchen, but we wanted this, that otherwise would be in a passageway, to be an interesting area to stop. So, chapter 2, how we transfer the idea of Venice to the selection of the pieces. And in this case, we don't take the physical aspects of the light in Venice, as we did, but we work a little bit on the cultural context of Venice and what does it mean and how that can be translated into the selection of pieces. We started our career, as I told you before, by choosing pieces for other designers. And we learned then that our way of looking at the projects is slightly different. We often get requests from other designers that said, well, we've designed most of the project, or architects even. We've designed the box, now we need the pieces. Of course we do that, but in order to do that, we need to understand fully and comprehensively what are the theoretical foundations of their project, because those are expressed in the box, but they are and have to be expressed in the materials and in the selection of the pieces. But most of the pieces that we do are either designed, in this case it's fine, because we control that design, or sourced, vintage pieces, and antiques, etc. How do we do it? Sourcing the pieces is probably the hardest part, because each piece has to speak of everything in the project the same way that the selection of stucco and velvet does. So a few of the ideas, I need to go back, a few of the ideas of Venice that we wanted to convey through the sourcing and curating of pieces are the idea of Venice as a center of trade. Historically, it was, well, silk and other precious goods, but now it's art. When we think of Venice, we think of the Biennale, which is the same. It's trade. The idea of East meets West. We like the idea of a cargo ship that is just in the port of Venice, as it could have been in the port of Valencia or in the port of Lisbon in the 16th century, bringing goods from everywhere in the world, and the fact that Venice was the center for the trade between the East and the West, and all the precious goods went through Venice, motivated the selection of pieces. We loved the idea of expressing in how we present the pieces that there is collecting, a collection of pieces. Sometimes, this is not that we are curating a collection of antiques and presenting them in a project, but we wanted to include, in the way we display the objects, we wanted to include this idea of how a collector would display those pieces. Of course, Carlos Carpa, and of course, a jewel box from which we take the inspiration for the materials that we mentioned before, lacquer wood or silk. So I think you can see it here in the image to the left. That is a little studio, that is a little passageway on the way to the main bedroom. We have the box that is made of turtle shell. Again, something that was historically typically something that was expensive and came from far away, so it brings in this idea of exotism through the pieces. To the left, you see three small niches. We bought a very large collection of small bronze sculptures from the 1970s from Spanish artists that were completely off the market precisely because of the size. This is very out of fashion, I would say. This idea of of decorating with miniatures, at least in Spain, is very grandmother-like. It's very, you feel like you go to a home and someone, oh, look at this, it's 2 inches. Oh, look at this, it's 5 inches. This is not what most of the design projects that we see now aim at. They aim more at a general atmosphere. But collecting and showing your collection to somebody else means making that person stop to see the little tiny thing that you have in a niche. So that is why that gives us the opportunity to work very well with, I think, with scale, with XXL pieces, and then with, as I said, 2 inches little doll. If you look on top of the cupboard to the left, the pieces are presented in that case as it would be an archaeological hoard, like you go to a museum, and they are all presented in a group. And that transmits the idea of all these pieces in a group make sense. Maybe one by one, they wouldn't so much. We continue on with a presentation of pieces. If you look to the left in that chessboard, that is a summary of the materials of the apartment and of the cultural ideas of the Venetian context expressed through pieces. You see the alabaster, because the box of the apartment is made of wood. You see pieces that are early 1940s, 1950s replicas of museum pieces, like the horse that you see there, speaking about this idea of collections. Then we have religious art, the pelican that is on top, that is gilded, so gold leaf on wood. We see that elsewhere in the apartment. We have Murano glass. We have brass. One of the big plates that you see is German, 17th century, from Nuremberg, in hammered brass. And then the one that is in metal, that is Ottoman, beginning of the 20th century. So we have we have the silver and the gold that will be a theme. And if you look to the right, those 2 sconces, actually they're not sconces, they are sculptures by a sculptor from the Netherlands in the beginning of the 1990s that we turned into 2 wall sconces, but they are decorated exactly as, well, they're made exactly like a little jewel. Actually, the designer is a jewel maker. We see again pieces that speak about collections that could have been in museums. And small to the right, you see again the presentation of all the pieces with the same material here, which is caramel-colored glass. Some of them from Murano, some of them from Mallorca, presented as they would be in a private collection. You see to the left the entrance to the to the bathroom of the second bedroom. It's not a big apartment. It's 2 bedrooms and 1 bigger social area with dining area, kitchen, and living room, but it's around 200 square meters, roughly. And then you can see, even the pieces that we have to select, if you look to the left, for example, the mirror that we found, that is Dutch, beginning of the 1800s, it has all the materials that we have elsewhere in the apartment. We have the inlaid stone, we have the wood, we have the lacquered wood, we have the metal, and we have the mirror itself. And then East meets West, as we see in the image to the right. For example, you see that is a Japanese screen as a headboard, but the lamps are French, and they are French, made mid-1800s, the period of Napoleon III, as chinoiserie. That means the French reimagining how they imagined China pieces were. So we have the cultural, really crossbreed pollination, we could say, that we find and that we found historically in Venice, where the influences got mixed. Now, having said all that, and having shared this with you, we believe in our studio that, of course, anything that is designed can be explained. Our way of working is by building a story behind our projects. We feel like we need to express this clearly to the clients and take them by the hand in this trip. In this specific case, we think that the narrative is a strong selling point, but at the same time, deep down in our hearts as designers, non-designers, we truly think that good design should be self-standing. In spite of all this overkill of explanation, I'm sharing it with you as the finger that points to where to look. But honestly, we would like to think that this project is something that we could be proud of without the explanation, if that was the case. It was a pleasure to share with you this. Time went by very, very, very fast. I will see some of you later, and certainly tonight and tomorrow. Muchas gracias.